Hey everyone, Jared here again. In my last video, I talked about how to go from just getting started understanding JavaScript and all of its fundamentals like variables, loops, conditionals, functions, data types, and putting them all together and making your first little things. In this video, I wanted to show one or two steps down the road where you can be given a UI with a design, basically, not a UI, a design for a UI, and building that into an app with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And in the process, the JavaScript you'll need will be a little bit more complicated than all the little things we were trying to build in the last video. So I'm going to share my screen and show you as well how I decided which project to build for this tutorial, and also how you can find other project ideas for yourself. It's very hard as a beginner to come up with ideas and designs for those ideas and everything. And this website makes it very simple. It's called frontendmentor.io, and you can filter the designs by free if you don't want to pay for the premium. And so they have free and premium designs. And I'm going to build one of the free ones so I don't expose their paid tier designs. And I will choose this to-do app here because it's simple enough, but with a to-do app, you can always get more complicated. So after we've built the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to make their design work and be functional, I can allude to how you involve more complex engineering topics and make it a real app. In this case, it'll just be like a front end app with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but there won't be like a database involved. There's no user accounts and things like that. And it won't be like built for scale necessarily. But when you find the project you want, you go here and then you download the starter files. If you don't have Pro, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this part where you can download a design file. So Figma is a design software that looks like this, and it'll basically show you like a series of screens kind of detailing how the app should look for every type of user interaction with the app, basically. With the starter files, you might need to like infer a little bit more, how to design certain parts of the app. Like some of the things you may think about that the user may want to do may not have an exact design, so you might have to make it up yourself. In this case, I didn't have to do any of that, so you don't have to worry about that for this project. Um, I'll just show you quickly what happens when you hit download. So when you hit download, you download a folder called To Do App Main, and then inside of it, you have some files. The README will give some instructions about how to build it, and I think it talks about like putting it on GitHub or something like that. I'm going to skip that stuff and just get into building basically. So these are the more important folders for that. The design is what I have open here. All the files here are from the design folder. So this is what I'm using to make this design. And images. The images folder contains all the images in the designs that I'm going to use in the app when I'm building it. So I will show you, what I'm going to do is show you what I built in just HTML and CSS, because this isn't meant to be largely the HTML and CSS lesson. If you want to see every detail about how I built it, I can build it for you in another video, but I will show you all the stuff that I will show you some important lessons with how I built the HTML and CSS, because you can build HTML and CSS with the foresight that you can set things up that'll make it easier in JavaScript to do what you want to do when it comes time to add that functionality in. So I'm going to show you the HTML and CSS and go over them a little bit, and then we'll work on the actual JavaScript together. So this is the app here. As you can see, first of all, I have this images folder here. So basically I copied from the downloads this images folder with all the images that will be necessary to make this app into my project, you see? And now I can use them in my project. So I'll show you very quickly, or quickly enough anyway, how I built this with HTML and CSS. As you can see, it looks pretty good compared to the design. It's like pretty similar. There's also mobile design to show you how it should look when it's in mobile. So here's desktop. If I shrink this more, we're getting into like mobile territory. So as you can see, like these bars are shrinking, and the moon is getting closer to the to-do header here. So it's responsive. And yeah, so I want to show you how I set up my HTML in order to make my life easier in JavaScript, and we'll see how it did make our lives easier. But to do a couple, I'll show you with some quick demos just in the HTML and CSS here. So I have a class on the body called light theme, and we're seeing the light theme right now. But if you see in the designs, there's also a dark theme. See this? The actual image up here is different. This color down here is different. The color of all this is different. And there's a sun here instead of a moon. And watch how easy this will be in JavaScript. I'll just have to change a class name and then the mode will look entirely different. Check it out. If I just change this to dark theme, then hit save, all of a sudden all those changes are done. The background image is different, the sun is different, the colors here are all different. So this is possible. So when it's possible in CSS to just apply a class name or not apply a class name and have the UI change how it's supposed to according to the designs, it takes some of the onus out of JavaScript, basically. It frees up your time with JavaScript to do more important things. So, and it just makes the JavaScript simpler. Switching between light mode and dark mode now in JavaScript is as simple as just like saying when you click this, change from one to the other, you know? So that makes our lives a lot simpler. If you didn't do this method, then what you would have to do is when you click on this guy to change the mode, you would have to say, okay, in JavaScript now update this image back here to a different image. Uh, Update all of these bars to have a background color of dark gray. Update the text of all these to be white. Update the background here to be black. Update the icon here to be a sun instead of a moon, you know? So that could be a series of instructions. And in JavaScript, it'll be a bigger block of code than just saying, when you click this, just change the class of the body from light theme to dark theme, or vice versa. So that's just going to show you how with HTML and CSS, you can set things up nicer for yourself when it comes to JavaScript. One more or two more as well. You'll notice that there's only one completed to do. I got it from the design here. So they're showing you what it should look like when it's completed. And if you notice here, I have 5 to-dos. I have a class bar to just describe like all these white bars indiscriminately. And they'll all just have similar stylings of like size and padding basically. But I have this class completed for a to-do to basically fill in this bubble and cross out the text and change the text color. So you'll see that all I have to do to add that UI to another to-do is to apply the class, and then there you go. And then if the user clicks it, that will happen. If the user clicks one that's marked as completed, then it should revert to, just looking normal again, right? So all you have to do in order, like when you click on these guys, as far as the UI goes, the UI changes, is to either apply the class completed or remove it. And lastly, same for filters. Down here, you can filter the list. You can see all of the to-dos. You can see just the active ones or just the ones that were completed. And all you have to do when the user clicks whatever filter it is, you want a UI that tells the user which filters they're currently looking at. So one of these filters will be the selected filter. So all you have to do is remove selected from any other filter, and just apply the class selected to the selected filter. And we start out with all being the selected filter. All right, so hopefully that is helpful in showing you how to uh, structure your classes to make your life easier in JavaScript when it comes time to apply the logic, basically. So now I'm going to start working on the JavaScript. But actually, just before that, I'll just show you kind of how I achieved this idea. Maybe you're thinking, okay, how did he do the light theme, dark theme thing? So if you're not aware, you can do variables in CSS. So you can basically define all the colors, and I defined like the image back here and the mode icon here as variables. So basically, I just change the value for these variables when the class dark theme is applied. And anywhere else in my CSS, they're going to be pulling in the value of these variables. So let's say we're looking at the mode icon. As you can see, I have a class called mode icon. So where is this? So the mode icon is okay, so sorry, let me just explain where this mode icon is in terms of my HTML. So my header is just the background image back here. The main is this white space, and then everything else is inside. See, all I have is a header and main inside the body. And inside the main, I have the main container, which is going to contain everything here. Inside my main container, I have my main header, which is this stuff up here. And then I have basically a div here, and then I called this my middle container, and then I have one more bar down here. So in my main header is where you find the title and my mode icon. So here's where I was trying to get to. So here's the mode icon and has a class mode icon. So my mode icon, maybe it should be an ID. Let's say it's an ID. I don't want to mess with anything now. But okay, mode icon. Notice that the background image for this guy is a variable called mode icon. So all I have to do is change what the value of this variable mode icon is based on dark theme or light theme, and then this is automatically going to have that value. So at the moment, when it's light theme, which is the default theme, I'm using the icon moon. See? Um, However, when the dark theme class is applied to the body, see, the body is where I'll apply the dark theme. Then the mode icon will be the icon sun. So basically, because this dark theme exists on the body, then everything inside the body will be affected by these changes. So anytime something is using one of these variables later down in our CSS, basically, or the other way to look at it is like inside of our body, if something is using the mode icon variable, because dark theme is applied to the body, then everything inside of the body will receive this mode icon value change. If the variable was defined, down in the middle container, then nothing outside of the middle container will have access to that variable, if that makes sense. But this is all CSS stuff anyway, so if you want to see more CSS related things, or you want me to explain HTML and CSS more for this project, or you want me to do a different project, then let me know and we can cover that stuff. But the main purpose of this video was supposed to be about JavaScript. So I want to show you basically with JavaScript, what I'm going to do is solve this in the most intuitive way for a beginner, and then show you how I think about it and how um, a different way of solving this with JavaScript will actually be more realistic, because when it'll take into account that these to-dos are actually probably going to be coming from a database. But we'll worry about that after. And then I'll just talk about features that you can add to this app in order to make it more complicated. And that will show you that it's less about what project you choose. Every beginner worries, like, what project should I do before getting a job? But it's not so much about the project as it is about how many features you built and how deep you went into the project. How is it full stack? Does it have all these features? Can the user do this? Can the user do that? Are there user accounts? All this stuff. It's more about that, and that will be impressive to somebody. So without further ado, let's actually get into JavaScript here. And just to do the easiest thing right now is, because I showed you already that changing the theme is so easy, all I have to do is change this class name, right? So why don't we just get that over with JavaScript? And all I have to do is grab this guy, which is my mode icon. So I have to do document dot. So I'm going to make a variable for this dot query selector dot mode icon. So this will grab the mode icon. All I have to do with the mode icon is add an event listener for clicks. And when it's clicked, I will, maybe it's too early to do arrow functions. So let me show you a normal function, then I'll show you an arrow function. So this is a normal function now. The E just represents the event that happened when there was a click. And when it is clicked, I would like to change the bodies class, right? So all I have to do is say document.body.class name equals, so it depends what it currently is. But let's just say I say light theme. Just to show you this at first. So when I click this, it's already light theme, so nothing happens. But if I change this to dark theme, that means when I click this, the function is going to change the body's class name to dark theme. See? But now when I click it again, nothing's going to happen. So I need it to change back and forth. So what is the logic there? We have to know what the theme currently is, right? This is sort of similar to what I showed in the last video. We have to know if it's currently light theme, then we change it to dark theme, right? So if the document body's class name is currently light theme, then we have to set it to dark theme. If it's if this is not true, then that actually means it's dark theme because we're only going to be setting it to light theme or dark theme. So that's why this else block is all we need. We don't have to say else if document body class name is dark theme. Then we set it to light theme. Because these are the only two possible cases. So we don't even need to say this. It's either light theme or it's dark theme. We know that. So if it's not light theme, then it's dark theme. And because this case is describing what happens if it's dark theme currently, then that's when we set it to light theme. So now we have the toggle happening for dark theme and light theme. This so far is not more complicated than anything we did in the last video, but I wanted to show you that HTML and CSS structured the right way allowed it to be this easy in JavaScript. Whereas if I didn't do it that way, I didn't use class names. In JavaScript, I would have to do multiple instructions in both of these cases, right? To say, okay, change this header to a different image, change these bars to black, change this background to black, change these text colors to white, and change a bunch of other colors. And imagine this UI got even crazier, then the amount of instructions increases when we change from dark mode and light mode, how many things we have to change in JavaScript. But we accomplish all that with just setting everything up ahead of time in HTML and CSS. Now, when we build the rest of the features in this UI here, basically, we will inherently have to use more JavaScript than we did in the previous video where I just built little things. So this will show, you know, it's basically just a step up in terms of, you've built little things, now we're building something, putting little things together in order to build something even more interesting. So first off, I did this dark light mode. So now let's work on creating a new to-do. Okay, so I see here that I have an input, right? What I want to do is be able to hit enter and then a new to-do gets created. And I want, it's up to me, but I'll just decide to put the to-do above all the previous ones. But you could also get it to put at the bottom, and that's an easy difference that I can show. But I need the enter key to work here because as you can see in the designs, there's no button to click that's like add, the user types and then they hit add. They didn't provide a button like that in this design. So adhering to this design, I infer that these are supposed to hit enter and that will create the new to do. So how do you react to this enter key press? Actually, what you can do is wrap. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention is this label here, very fast. The reason I did label is because I'll show what happens without it first. So no label. I have to click here to start typing in the input, but I wanted to be able to click anywhere inside of this whole bar in order to start typing. I think it's nicer UI because the only purpose of this whole bar is to start typing a new to-do. So why, if you notice, like if I click up here, it's not allowing me to start typing, or down here, right? I have to be very precise in clicking right there. I didn't like that. So I put a label around the bar, and I paired the label, see this value here, new to do input, with the ID of the input. So what that does is it pairs the label and the input together. So if I click anywhere inside the label, it will focus on the input. So now if I click even all the way up in the top left corner, right, I see, you see, click all the way in top left corner and it focuses on the input. So I don't have to be as precise, and that's just nicer for the user. Okay, so how do we react to an enter key press once I've typed what I want for my new to do? Well, one way you can do that, or the best way I think, is to wrap the input in a form. And when you hit enter, there's an event for the form you can react to called submit. So basically, let's just give this form an ID. I'll call it create to do form. So let's grab it now in JavaScript. Create to do form. And this is what I'm going to grab in query selector. So now I have my create to do form, and I'm going to add an event listener to it, and the event is called submit. So submit is basically the event when a form is submitted, either via like a submit button, which is something you can have inside of a form, or if the user hits enter. Otherwise, reacting to the enter key press is a lot more ugly, because in JavaScript you have a window. The concept of window is like the outermost JavaScript object, if you will. And uh, so you'd have to look for like a key press event. And let's see, console.log e.keycode. So basically, when I'm focused in the browser, let me open up my console as well. So when I'm focused on the app, notice like no matter what key I press on my keyboard, there's a key code assigned with it. This is a spacebar 32, F is 102 key code, H is 104 key code. So the window recognizes all of these events happening. The issue is like the enter. So enter, the key code for enter is 13. So I would have to say, if the event key code is 13, then add a new to do. But that's ugly, and if I'm just looking at this as a collaborator on this project, it's harder to quickly look at it and see what's going on. So it's much better to have a form. This is what you would do without the form, basically. But with the form, you can listen to a submit on the form, which is a lot more intuitive. Okay, so first thing you have to do when a form is submitted is called prevent default. I'll write this out, event. So every time an event happens, the function that runs when the event happens takes an argument called event. And the event is an object that is given to you by JavaScript, basically, and it has a bunch of properties on it already. So one is called event.target, and that will be event.target is what the event happened on, what element in our DOM was where the event was applied to, basically. So in this case, the event.target, when I submit the form, is the form. So anyway, one more property is called prevent default. And basically what prevent default does is prevents the default form submission behavior. Um, there's not much reason at the moment to go into what happens by default when you click a form. Almost nobody uses that default behavior nowadays. So it's almost just standard practice at this point to just prevent default when you submit a form. Um, I'll show you what happens if you don't. So I tried to console log. Let's see if this will work. I don't even know. Event.target. So without preventing default, when I submit the form, do you see how the browser, like, let me start over. So this is my URL, notice. And then when I submit the form, I get this question mark thing here. So submitting the form actually like changes the URL and refreshes the page. And your code is supposed to react to like this new URL and use this new information to change the UI, sort of. Um, but we don't have to really concern ourselves with that too much. Let's just prevent the default behavior so that when we submit the form, uh, we don't refresh the page with a new URL and everything. Because when we refresh the page, a lot of the stuff that we accomplished might go away, basically. So anywho, now we can define what happens when we submit the form. So the purpose of submitting this form, if you will, is that we want to create a new to-do, right? So how do we create a new to-do? Well, you have to create a new element. So let's create a variable called new to-do, and we're going to use document.createElement. And if you notice, my to-dos, each one, is this div of class bar to-do. So I have a class called bar again to just describe the basic styles of each of these bars. And then use to-do to specify any styles that are more specific to the to-do bars as opposed to like the input bar, the filters bar, or this bar down here. And notice that the to-do is effectively a div. So I'm creating a div, and then I have to apply the classes. So I say new to-do dot class name equals bar to-do. So that's going to be the class. The class is basically for the new to-do. And then inside the to-dos, look at what I have. I have a span class circle. I have to-do text, a span of class to-do text. And then I have a span of class delete button. Inside of that span, I have an image, which is the cross. So if you notice this image here. So I need all this stuff in the new to-do I create as well. So let me copy all this. I like a different formatting, so let me just change that really quick. Not important. So I'm going to copy this stuff that's inside the to-do, and I can say new to-do dot inner HTML equals, and I use these guys in case I want to input any JavaScript, these backtick quotations. Okay, and okay, so this is my new. So the new to-dos inner HTML is going to be a span of class circle, to-do text, and the delete button. However, we want to use the text that came from the form, correct? So therefore, we have to use JavaScript to put something here. But we have to figure out, like in JavaScript, what the user types here. So when a form is submitted, we can actually extract the data from that form. If you notice on my input, I have a name to new to-do text. So the input's name is how I'm going to say, okay, get the new to-do today, the new to-do text inside my form. So in JavaScript, we have something called form data. It's like an object in JavaScript. How do we do this? Event.target. I might be getting this wrong, so I'll look it up if I have to. But remember, the event.target is the form itself, and then there's a JavaScript object called form data that we can instantiate, we can create a new instance of this form data object and provide it with event.target. The form data object is designed to accept a form DOM element effectively and convert it into a format in JavaScript that we can use to extract the data. So if we're just looking, I'll just log out this form data for you to see. So when I submit, boom, here's my form. Ignore this for now because I don't have this variable called something, right? So I'll just take that out. Clear this. Okay, so when I submit, oh my God. What's the problem here? Anyway, I'll just keep that for now. So when I submit the form, I'm just logging form data. So form data is like in a specific format. So this form data variable, which is the result of creating a new instance of this form data object, has all these method properties. So one of the method properties is called get. And so what I can do is do form data.get. So it's a method property of form data. And then I specify the name of the input. Oops. Copy. Now let's try. And as you can see, when I do form data.get the new to-do text, which again, the new to-do text is the name of the input, then it gets me the data for that input. And the data for that input is, the input value, which is what the user typed. So that's why it's logging out here. If this is looking weird to you, either, just do this a few times until it starts to make a little sense. Down the road, you'll understand this object idea more. It's a little bit more of a non-beginner topic, I suppose. The other way to do this is to actually just say, uh, uh, maybe it's easier to do it this way. Let me complete this idea, then I'll show you the other way to do it. So basically, all I have to do is, so I have this form data. All I have to do is form data.get the new to-do text. So I create a variable called new to-do text equal to the result of getting the new to-do text from the form. And then I pop it into my inner HTML of my new to-do. So now my new to-do is going to, let me console log my new to-do now. So boom, 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 I type, then I hit submit. Now I get all of this is my new to-do. So as you can see, it's a div with class bar to-do. Inside we have circle, a to-do text with the proper to-do text that I typed up here in it, and a delete button, as defined here. So that worked. The other way, if I didn't know this form data trick, the easier way probably for you to think of is grabbing this input. So when the form gets submitted, grab this input and extract the value from it. So you could do as well, let's grab it up here. Just because I like to do all these grabbings of things up here, because logically it doesn't really help very much down here. I just want to have them all set up already. New to do text input, let's say. And the ID of this input is new to do input. So I could say, okay, now down here, a new to do text input dot value, I think is how I would do it. Let's try it. So my new to do text is the value of the input. It's almost faster, isn't it? Let's console log new to do text. Let's see if that worked. Okay, that worked too. And then let's see. Yes, so this worked as well. And it's actually even easier, so why don't we just keep that? But if the form is longer, like if the form has if there's a form with like many inputs, then this form data idea becomes a little bit more beneficial because it's kind of organized and you can just get different properties of this form data as opposed to doing something like, okay, grabbing every single input in the form. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's just a little neater, I guess, to have the form data object. But if you didn't understand the form data thing, you can completely ignore it at this point because, you're still probably starting out relatively. And this is a fine method of grabbing what was typed here, so nothing wrong with that. So when the form is submitted, we create this new to-do. And now what we want to do is add it to our list. So how do we add it? Well, we have to figure out what our list is, and then we're going to add the element that we just created to that list. So where's the list? It's in our middle container. It's called to-do container. So as you can see, inside of our to-do container div, we have all of our to-dos. See that? And we just created a new one. So we have to stick the new to-do inside this to-do container. We could either stick it at the end or the beginning. There's methods for both, and I'll show both. I'll do sticking it at the end first because I want to stick it at the beginning. I think it makes a little more sense to see the most recently created to-do at the top by default. So what I do now, first of all, I'm going to want to grab this to-do container. So I'm going to do that again up here and say const to-do container query selector dot can do to-do container. And so now I have the to-do container, and I can to-do container dot append is this method property. And using that, I can add another DOM element to it. So now when I submit the form, it adds a new DOM element. See that? Now, in order to stick it at the top, I use one called prepend. Append is at the end, prepend's at the beginning. And now when I type it, they're getting added to the beginning. All right, so that is creating a to-do. Now there's a couple considerations when we create a to-do. Do we want to allow empty to-dos? I don't think so. So we want to ensure that the to-dos have a length, that somebody actually types something first before hitting enter. We also don't want, we also would probably prefer that this gets cleared, after every submission, right? Because why would you want the same text over and over again? Like if I wanted to create two to-dos in a row, one is like jog in the park, and then the next is gonna be like do some coding. I'm gonna have to delete all this first, right? Why don't we just have a delete by default? So let's do a delete by default. That's pretty easy. I just do the form dot clear dot reset. So now when I submit the form, it's gonna create the new to-do, add it into our to-do list, and then it's gonna reset the form. So resetting the form brings all of the inputs inside the form back to their original state. See, now we're back empty again. So that was easy. And now, so also I just want to make a point real quick that you don't have to know how to do these things by memory. You have to get good at recognizing what you want to achieve. And that's why it's helpful to have a UI and to start making it and being like, oh, that's not ideal. That, think of it like you're the user, do you really want to type something and then have the text still be there? No. So then you think to yourself, all right, the goal now, define the small goal. The small goal now is to have the text clear every time I submit this input here and hit enter. So then that becomes a goal that you can Google in order to figure out how to do it, because maybe you didn't know that the form has a reset method property that you can call, and that will reset the form. Okay, so now we want to prevent the user from being able to create empty to-dos. So in order to do that, basically when the user hits enter, we want to check if the to-do has any length, whatever the user typed. So here we are running this function when the user submits the form, and here we are getting the new to-do text from the input. So at this point in time, we have the to-do text, and this is a good time to check if there's anything in it, because if there's not, we don't want to do anything really. So we have to say if new to-do text.length is greater than 0, then we do all this stuff. So now nothing's happening when I hit enter until I start typing. Now also notice that when I type spaces, I've technically put something in there, but that's not good. So we actually have this method property of strings called trim, and that will remove any of the spaces before or after real characters of text. So once I have typed some text, it's possible the user put some spaces before or after that text. It's going to trim all that. And so basically, if I've just typed some spaces, so I'll refresh the page now. If I've just typed some spaces, when I trim, it will actually just be an empty string. Oh, okay, that didn't work. Oh, maybe I didn't save. Let me see. Yeah, I just forgot to save. So now trimming new to do text, even though I've typed spaces, brings the text to uh, basically a text with no line. I just realized though, even when I hit enter, because I wrapped all of this behavior inside of this if statement, checking that I typed some real characters in here, the form's not resetting when I hit enter, but I'd prefer that every time I hit enter that the form resets. So I'm still not going to be creating a to-do and sticking it inside the to-do container, but I will reset the form. So if the user for some reason thought they wanted to type all this and then hit enter, it's not going to create a new to-do, but it will reset the form and remove all those spaces that they just typed when they start typing the next to-do that they want to make. See? Okay, so that is creating a to-do. All right, so now let's work on toggling the to-dos as completed or not completed. So when I click a to-do that is not completed, it should become completed and vice versa. And if you recall, because we set our CSS and HTML up nicely, all I have to do is either add or remove the class of completed on the to-do. So first of all, I have to set up my JavaScript to react to clicks on every to-do. So first thing I have to do is grab my to-dos. And I have to do query selector all to grab all of the items with the class to-do because there's multiple to-dos. So I have to do query selector all, and that will get them all of the to-dos and put them all in a array type format, basically. So now I have to-dos, and I can, for each of them, I can add an event listener. So I have to add an event listener listening for clicks on every single to-do. So now I'm listening. So for every to-do, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 right now, when they are clicked, I need to either add or remove their class completed. So I can say to do dot class list dot toggle completed. And that will basically do the work for me of saying completed or not completed. And again, you probably would not have known about toggle. So you could either you would have found it through Googling or you would have achieved it in a slightly longer way of saying if to do dot class list dot contains to do, then contains completed, then you remove the completed class. Otherwise, you add the completed class. But with toggle, you don't have to do all this logic. It will do it for you. If the class completed is there, it will remove it. If it's not, it will add it. Hey, sorry for the outfit change. I just realized I forgot to do something, and that is that when I create a new to-do, it's not clickable, like it's not going to toggle on and off, and that's obviously a problem. The reason for that is because we only initially add the event listener that toggles completed or not when a to-do gets completed. So all of the to-dos that were hard-coded into our HTML file to begin with are on the page, and then when our JavaScript file runs, we put the event listener on all those to-dos. However, if we later create a new one, that one will not have the event listener applied to it. So we're going to actually have to apply the event listener again when we create a new to-do. So I'm going to copy the add event listener stuff and bring it over as well to where we're creating a new to-do. Don't worry if this looks slightly different. I don't remember exactly if it will, but the principle will be the same, that when we create our new to-do, right, we have a new to-do, we're creating it, we're giving it text, we're giving it inner HTML and all this stuff. Actually, this stuff should be inside as well. So hold on. I'm just going to put that down there for a second, comment it out for a second. We don't even need to create this new to-do if the text that the user typed is empty, right? So we can put those lines in the if statement as well. So we only create this new to-do if we actually have something of value in here. And then we add the text, add the class name, and then populate inner HTML. And finally, on this new to-do, we have to add the event listener that we added to all the other to-dos before. That when it's clicked, it's going to toggle the completed or not, and then update items left based on whether or not it's completed. So now, when I create a new item, I get new to-do text is not defined. And that is because, where's new to text input? Okay, so that I have. New to-do text is input.value. I need this up here. I need new to-do text before the if statement. So now, otherwise this variable would be undefined, as the error was that I got. So now I can create, and now I have the issue that to-do is not defined, and that issue is, if I click on the error, I can see what line of code that it's the problem, and it's on line 33, and it's because in my event listener, I used the wrong variable to add to toggle the class list upon. So I need to toggle it on the new to-do, which is the element that I just created here. So one more time, should work now, and now it's toggling, and as you can see, the items left is also changing. And lastly, we have one thing to consider, and that is that, remember, we just copied this function from down below and pasted it up here. And we have a concept that I've mentioned before called dry, which stands for don't repeat yourself. And what that means is if you find yourself writing the same lines of code, you'll get better at this over time, but that's an indication that you should extract something out and write it once and use whatever you're storing that thing in multiple times. So in this case, we can create a name for this function. So we only write the logic for this function, these two lines once, and then we just use the name of the function wherever we're going to need this functionality. So basically going to copy this function, give it a name, to do click handler, and then replace everywhere we use that function. So we use it here, and we also do it here. So I can replace it down here too, and it's going to do the exact same thing for any to-do, whether it's a new to-do or an old to-do. The only issue that we'll see and that I can demonstrate for you now is that if we click this now, we're using this variable in the function called new to do at the moment, and it's going to give a reference area error that new to do is not defined, and that is because in this function there is no variable called new to do. That was a variable that we defined all the way in this function, but these don't have the same context, this function and this function. Therefore, we have to toggle the class on the to-do, but we have to have access to the to-do. So you might think, okay, event.target is the thing that was clicked, so let's toggle the class completed. So I need to create a new to-do to test this, and it appears to be working. But look what happens when I click here. That didn't quite work properly, right? This guy didn't get filled in, and that is because we set the class completed on the wrong thing. if I console log what the event.target is, then create a new to-do. So right now it's working because I'm clicking on the div, right? And that is what we want to toggle the class completed for, so it's working. But if I click the text directly, that's what it recognizes that we clicked, and that's what's getting the class completed. Therefore, since the div is not getting the class completed, this circle is not changing in its appearance based on the way we set up CSS. Therefore, event.target is unreliable in this case because we have to consider the case if that was clicked or the div was clicked, or if the circle was clicked. See, even that's not working because it's not the div that we're clicking in essence. So what we have to do is give this function access to the to-do that's getting clicked. So I pass in the actual to-do, and then I can toggle the class directly on the to-do, and that's way more reliable. So when you're looking at functions that you pass into as event listeners, so they're functions that run when an event listener fires, they inherently get this event object with all the information about the event that happened. But if you want to add more stuff to the function, then you have to pass stuff to it. So actually what I can do is write an empty function, or not empty, but it has event, right, by default. That's what I just said. But this function can call the to-do click handler function. And that can pass both the event and the new to-do. In other words, the to-do that got created in this case. I'm going to have to do something similar where we're adding event listeners to the other to-dos down here, where instead of just running to-do click handler, I need to give access, the to-do click handler access to the to-do as well, the to-do itself. In fact, I don't even really need this event object, so I don't even really need to think about it, but I just put it in there anyway because we do have access to it by default. So now it should work regardless of where we click inside the to-do. I'm clicking directly on the text, and as you can see, it's still working. So now we have properly refactored so that anytime we have to add a to-do click handler in our code, we just need to apply this function in the add event listener line, basically. See, I've written these two lines just once, and I've used the name of the function twice. And it's very easy to read that wherever I have a to-do and add event listener, click on it, I run a function that runs the to-do click handler. And so if there's ever an issue with any to-do when it's clicked, they're all running the same two lines of code. So it'll work or not work for all the to-dos most likely. And that makes it easier to kind of figure out where the code is that's making things go wrong. You can imagine maybe, we have an issue with what happens when the to-do gets clicked. And if we didn't have this structure, we would have to both consider the function here and the function here and debug between both, here, and debug between both of them where the actual issue is. In this case, the issue can only be in one place, so the code is more organized, and that makes our debugging and future development more efficient. Cool. So that is the toggle. Now we need the delete to do when these X's are clicked. So that's our next goal here. If you notice right now when we click them, it's actually just toggling the to-dos because the X is inside of each to-do. So here's a to-do, and then inside is this delete button X. However, we want to establish a specific event listener on the delete button itself. So we have a class of delete button. So I'm going to grab all my delete buttons, delete buttons, dot delete button. So again, I'm using query selector all because there are multiple delete buttons. And so basically for each delete button, function delete button. For each delete button, I want to add an event listener on the delete button. Function event. So when I click each delete button, I want something to happen. So what do we want to happen? We want the to-do to go away, right? So the question becomes, let's look at the event.target. If I click on the X, I'll either get the span or the image, depending on precisely where I click. It's very close, obviously. Most of the time I'm clicking the image, occasionally I get the span. But regardless of if I click the span or the image, how do I associate that span or image with the to-do that I want to remove, right? I can't event.target.remove because that is just going to remove the X. See? We're going to find a way to associate that event.target with the to-do that contains it. So you have to find the to-do that contains the close image or span. So let's just look up how to do it. I already know how, but ChatGPT will be better, so I recommend that, but let's just go with this. Find parent element of clicked element. So you want to get the parent node. So sometimes DOM elements are also called nodes. So you want to get the parent node of a clicked element. So you click an element, you want its parent, right? To do is a parent of these guys. But the confusing thing is we can either be clicking the image or the span. We're not very precise. It could be one of the two. So if it's the image, the parent of the image is a span. So we need the parent of this span, which will be the to-do. So I actually think that instead of using event.target, because the event.target could either be an image, so we have to find its grandparent, or the span, and we have to find the parent. Why not? We do have the delete button, and the delete button again is something with a class delete button. So if we use the delete button, we can we're basically using this span. So we know we want the parent of the delete button. So all we need is the event.target's parent, and that's what we want to remove. So how do you get the parent? You do event.target.parent node. So all I have to do is not event.target. I want to do the delete button dot parent node dot remove. And that, not remove child, but remove. So the delete button's parent node, again, the delete button is this span. And so its parent is to do, and we want to remove that guy. So now let's see if that works. All right, it appears to be working. Okay, so that is deleting a to-do. And now we want to do this clear completed button. So first let's grab the clear completed. So basically what it's going to do is however many are marked as completed, clicking clear completed should remove all three of these. So we should be deleting all of them from the page. So let's get our clear completed button equals document.clear sector clear completed button. And if I look at my HTML, my clear completed is in this div here, and I called it clear completed button. So that's good. So this will work. And now I have to add an event listener to the clear completed button. And when it is clicked, I'm basically going to want to determine which to-dos are marked as completed and then remove each of them, or remove each of them from the page. So how do we determine all of the to-dos that are marked as complete? Well, remember, the way that we've been distinguishing if a to-do is marked as completed or not is if it has the class completed, right? So what I can do is get all of the completed to-dos and then remove each of them. So how do I get all the completed to-dos? Well, I have to do document.querySelector all, and then .completed, right? Even better would be .bar.completed. So I'm being to-do.completed. So I'm being very specific, saying basically this means the elements that have a class to do and a class completed as well. Because just in case later down the road we use the class completed in some other fashion by accident, then there might be some confusion. But this is specifically saying any to-do that is also marked as completed, or anything with the class to do that also has a class completed. And that is our completed to-dos. Is document.querySelectorAll.todo.completed. And now let's just console log that to make sure that that worked, that we have the correct to-dos. So I'm going to mark 3, and then I will click this and see. Okay, so I got a list of 3, and this is 1, this is 1, this is 1. So it worked. And now all I have to do is loop through these for each completed function, completed to-do. For each one, I have to just remove it. Completed to do that remove. So now I mark 3, boom, they're all gone. Cool. So that is clearing completed to-dos. And now I want to do this items left down here to know, right now, there would be 3 items left, right? We start with 5, and so that's why it says 5 by default, but we want that to change now. So right now, for this items left guy, I just put it in a span and said 5 items left, and I gave it a class of items left. But the words items left are never going to change, just the number. So I'd actually rather just put the number under some special class. And then show you what I'm doing in a second. Okay, let me try that again. So I want items left. The important thing to have the class of items left is the number, because that's what's going to change. So I need a class to identify like what this number here so I can update it. But I'm going to just wrap. So basically, this whole text is a span, and then I put an extra span with a class on this 5. The outer span regarding this whole thing, I don't really need a class because I don't do anything in particular with it. It's just the number. But I did wrap it all in a general span because I want this div to have 2 children, because here's one child, here's one child, and if you look at my CSS on stats, or rather .bar, I am using display flex and justify content space between. So I want the space between all the children of each bar to be separated. So here's one child, here's one child. And the design dictated that the items left and the clear completed should be on opposite sides. So this is, to me, is like a display flex justify content space between. So this should be a child, this should be a child. So that's why in my HTML, I have 2 children of this bar. And so this child is a span. And I have the inner span here with a specific class name to identify the number, which is going to change with JavaScript. So now in my JavaScript, I'm going to grab the items left span, and I'm going to work on updating that over time. So I'm going to call it the items left placeholder, and I'm going to grab the dot items left. That's going to give me the DOM element. So now I'm going to have to update this number whenever things change, right? So let's say that right now the items left is 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this one's completed. What happens if I mark this as not completed? Then I want the items left to become 6, right? Or if it is 6 right now, when I click one, I want it to be 5, and then if I click another one, I want it to be 4. So every time I click a to-do, the items left needs to change. Also, if I delete to-dos, the items left should change, right? Now there should be 3. And clear completed will not affect the items left, um, because things that are already marked as completed will have already updated the items left. So clearing completed is just getting rid of the already completed stuff. So we want to do something, update the items left when an item is clicked, either clicked or specifically the X is clicked. If the to-do is completed, then we want to subtract 1 from here. Actually, how do we determine this number in general, right? The number here is basically all of the to-dos that do not have the class completed, right? So we want to grab, so basically, we don't have anything storing this number 5 anywhere, right? So we're going to have to determine it with JavaScript. And basically, we're going to have to do, I'll probably put this into a function in some fashion, but I'm just writing this out as I think. So we're going to have to do document.querySelector dot to do, query selector all, right? That gives us all of the elements with the class to do, so all of our to dos. And then we're only going to want to grab the ones that are not with class completed. So we actually have an easier way to do this. I'm not going to do this in the vanilla way, like in the very beginner way. You can figure out how to achieve something similar, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to show you this filter function, which basically every array, actually it's not true. I have to, okay, so let me show you something. So I'm creating a variable called current to-dos. I'm going to console.log it. And this current to-dos, that just happened here. That's what you're seeing in the console here, because this is not wrapped in the function, which means it's just going to run when my JavaScript file runs. And my JavaScript file runs. Once it's imported into my HTML file, all these code lines run. But all these code lines, most of them are creating variables, creating event listeners, creating functions. So while variables and functions are being created, nothing actually happens. Things happen when event listeners are fired, but if you just have plain code, not wrapped in a function, not wrapped in an event listener or anything, it's just going to run when the code gets down to this point. So when the JavaScript is being processed, we get down to lines 55, 56, and these lines are just going to run right there. So this line runs, and I have a variable current to-dos that stores all of the current to-dos, and then I'm logging them out. And that, as you can see, I have an array. I have a node list of 6 nodes, 6 DOM nodes. And what I want to tell you is that a node list, for whatever reason, does not have all the method properties of a standard array in JavaScript. So let me explain what I mean. I'm just going to create a random array, and let's do hi, hey, ahoy, and yo. And let's say I wanted to filter this array and just get the items that have an H inside. So yo will not be a part of that. Then I can do, so arrays have a method property called filter. And what filter will do is apply a function to each item in the array. And only when this function returns true for that item will that item remain. So if I return that the item dot includes an H, then that means that if the item includes an H, then the item will remain part of the new, hold on, let me do a new array, and then console out the new array. So new array is the result of filtering the random array for items that include, sorry, I should just say H, items that include H. So the way this filter function works is it will run on every item in random array and run this function. And if this function returns true, it will keep that item in the new array. And if it returns false, it won't. So item dot includes h for this will return true. Items dot includes h for this will return true. Items dot include h will return true for this, but not for this. So now if I console log my new array, you'll see that I have hi, hey, and ahoy, but not yo in the new array. Now, what I want to show you is that with current to-dos, I cannot do current to-dos dot filter. To-do dot includes h, I don't know. See, you get an error that current to-dos dot filter is not a function. And that is because query selector all gave us a node list, and a node list is sort of like a limited array in JavaScript. It doesn't have all of the method properties that you would find with a real normal JavaScript array. It does have for each, but I do want to use something like filter in this case. So what I can do is something called array.from. If I wrap a node list in array.from, it creates an array out of a node list. And now current.todos.filter function to do return to do dot includes hi, whatever, includes h. Now it didn't give me the error that I can't do filter. This is not going to work because to do is a DOM element, not just a random string, but as you can see, the filter was not the problem in this case. So now I can use filter because I did array.from. So this is another example of a capital letter object in JavaScript, which means that it is like a fundamental type of object in JavaScript that has, you know, things that you can use in your program. To do dot includes h. Right, so filter is not the problem now. So now that I can use filter, what I'm going to want to do is filter the to-dos where the to-dos, the class list does not contain completed. So if the exclamation point means not. So I only want the to-dos where the class list does not contain completed. So without this exclamation point, we were getting the to-dos with class list completed, but I want the to-dos that don't have the class list completed. That will give me the correct list of to-dos that I want, that I will calculate for the items left, right? So now let's store this in a variable called to-dos not completed, and then I'll console log it to make sure it worked. And as you can see, I was given 5, and each one is the ones that are not completed. So that worked, and now I can use this list, this variable to-dos not completed, has 5 items, right? So that's the amount of items that are left, right? It's the items of to-dos that aren't completed. So now I can do, I can replace, where is it? Items left. I can put a number in here. So if the number ever changes, I can basically grab all of the to-dos, filter for the ones that aren't marked as completed, and then stick the new number here. So that's the plan. So the items left is a variable that we already have stored in a variable. So I can just use this items left placeholder variable again and change its inner text to be the to-dos not completed .length. So if I were now, because all these code lines run, and we initially have one completed to-do and 5 non-completed to-dos, then even if I delete this 5 here and say that, initially in our HTML, there'll be nothing there. When I run, like when I hit save, or I just did hit save, and you see the 5 there, because this JavaScript runs, once it gets imported into the HTML file. And so these lines run, and these are going to basically stick the 5 there. So I didn't write 5 in the HTML file, but with JavaScript, the 5 ends up there. If I were to start my HTML file out with maybe only 3 to-dos and 1 non-completed to-dos and 1 completed one, and I hit save, we'll see the correct amount of items left here, because these code lines are effectively going to work for regardless of how many there are. Okay. However, we were talking before, and the goal here is to update this number, right? When I change the to-dos in the list, right? When the user changes it. So those times for one are when we toggle on and off a to-do, right? So that functionality is here, where we're setting an event listener on every to-do, and we're toggling the to-do as completed or not. So once we toggle the to-do as completed, we are going to want to update the items left. So, hint, hint, we want a function that does that. And we already wrote the logic for that function. So all we do is we wrap this in a function, and now we use this function. I'm just going to move it right here so we can look at everything. So this function update items left will grab all of the current to-dos. It will and create an array out of all the current to-dos rather than having a node list, because now I can filter all the current to-dos. And when I filter them for the ones that don't have the class completed, and then the amount of to-dos not completed is what I put in the items left placeholder inner text. And so every time I toggle on and off a to do, I'm updating the items left with the instructions that we just wrote. So now, as you can see, it's working. Now, you may have noticed that when I refresh and start fresh, now items left is empty, right? So my choices here for now are to either stick items left, just put 5 in there because I know that there are 5 already, or I could not do that and just make sure that I run update items left when on the initial run of this JavaScript file, basically. So this line will run because this line is not wrapped in any function or anything. It's going to run. So that's why now, if I refresh the page, we start out with the correct number there, even though I didn't put it in my HTML file. Also, when we delete a, oh, it's actually working. That's funny. So can you guess why the items left is working, even though I'm clicking on the delete button, and the delete button removes the to do, but there's no code here saying to update the items left, right? So why is the items left updating? Well, even though we're clicking on an X, we're also clicking on the to-do, right? Because the X is inside the to-do. There's an event listener for clicks on the X, and there's event listeners for a click on to-do. X is inside to-do, so both click events fire. So the delete event does remove the to-do, but also this event listener will fire as well. So while this line will do nothing because the to-do has been deleted from the screen, so toggling as class list doesn't mean anything, this line does run as well, and that updates the items left. So technically, we've already solved for that. I think if somebody were reading this code, they would be confused why it's working potentially. So I think it's not a bad idea to explicitly put this here. And because then somebody reading this code will understand, yes, we do want to update the items left every time the delete button gets clicked. That makes sense. And I'll go one step further. There's one more event method property, uh, stop propagation. This, let me show you what it does. To do, click. So I'm not going to use this event stop propagation. And when I click the X, I console log to do clicked because that ran the to do event listener, right? What if I event.stop propagation? Now notice the console log did not happen. This to do, this click event on the to do did not fire anymore. Why? Well, because remember how I said that when the click happens, first it will fire on the thing that actually got clicked on, more specifically, right? We more specifically clicked on the X. We did also click on the to do, but more specifically the X. So the event basically, it's one click event that applies to two listeners, and it fires first on the more specific one. And the matter of specific just refers to what's inside of what. So this is more specific than this because this is inside of this, right? So we clicked on the more specific thing. So this event listener function will run first. So if we event stop propagation, all that means is we're preventing the event from firing on later event listeners. So now the benefit of doing this is simply that we're not running this update items left function twice. The result of running this function twice will be absolutely the same, so it doesn't really matter, but we're just reducing the amount of work our computer has to do. So we're only running it once because only once is necessary. Why would you want your program to repeat the same function over and over if the result will be the same? You want your computer to, be as efficient as possible, only have to run code lines when it actually has to do something. So this is just beneficial for that purpose. And I'll even add a comment for anyone, prevent to do click listener. So I'm preventing the to do click event listener basically by doing this line. So now if anyone were reading my code, they would see very clearly what I'm doing here. And there's one scenario I forgot, which is that when we create a new to do, we want the items left to increase as well, obviously. So we also have to calculate the update and run update items left after we've created a new to-do and then added it to the DOM. So we want to update the items left after we add the new to-do after being created to the DOM. And now, as we can see, the update items left is running properly and adding our new item to the count. Okay, so that is now calculating the items left. And last but not least, we have our filters. So let's look at the filters a little bit more in depth. When we click active, we will not want to see any of the completed to-dos. And if we click completed, we will not want to see any of the active to-dos, just the completed. And by default, we're on all. But if we switch back to all later on, we want to see both the completed and active to-dos. Again, if we clear completed or we hit the X, these to-dos will be completely gone. But if that's not the case, it's possible that we have active and completed to-dos. So that's our goal now. Let's see. So in JavaScript, we will want to set event listeners on our filters. So we have three different spans representing each filter. Each one has a class of filter. And so we're going to want to set an event listener on each of them. So I'm going to grab our filters, clear selector all with the class filter. And then I'm going to basically take, I'll add this all the way to the bottom. So I'm going to put all the code that runs right away at the very bottom of the JavaScript file. So I'm going to write my stuff here regarding setting an event listener on each filter. The reason for that is just so that the code is a little bit more organized. Basically, every variable declaration, every event listener declaration, every function declaration, these are all basically just storing information on the browser on the computer, and nothing is actually happening until I start clicking things. But this is actually going to happen right away. So I like to just do all the instantiation, all the creation of variables, functions, event listeners, and stuff that don't actually really fire right away first. And then I just put the code that happens right now at the very bottom. It's just a more organized way, because if this is up here and there's other code that's like running immediately, it might be hard to figure. Like, let's say that there was some issue that I figured out was happening when the code runs before I click anything on the screen, then that means there's a problem with the code that's running immediately in my JavaScript file. And if all the code that's running immediately in my JavaScript file is all over the JavaScript file, it'll be harder to debug. So that's why it's down here. Anyway, for the filters, I want to set event listeners listening for clicks on each one. Action, event. Okay, so when each filter gets clicked, I will want to change what I see here. So the way I'm going to do that is to basically, if I click active, I don't want to see this guy, but I don't want to remove it from my HTML file. Let me shrink everything to make it look more orderly again. So right now the first guy is completed, the rest are not. If I click active, I want the first guy to disappear, but I still want it to remain in my HTML file, because if I click completed after, I want to see just that, but I want to see that up here, right? So it can't be completely removed from HTML. So I'm not going to dot remove anything that has the class completed when I click active, right? I want another way to hide it from the screen, but not remove it completely from my HTML, my DOM, if you will. So the way to do that instead is to just give it display none. If it has display none, you won't see it. So let's do that. When I click a filter, it depends which one, right? So I have to figure out which filter got clicked. I can also create a different class for every filter and set an event listener on each event of each filter specifically. But I'm just going to do the same event listener on any filter. And what I'm going to do is use its inner text to determine which filter got clicked. So the inner text, I'm going to do that to lowercase just to like standardize what text I will. And let's think down the line. There's like 8 more filters, and maybe some have multiple words, and I don't know. I just want to make them all lowercase. So basically, as far as my logic in my JavaScript is concerned, all of the filters will be lowercase. So let filter, I'm going to say let specific filter equal this. So now the event.target is the guy that got clicked, the inner text is the word itself, and then I lowercase it. So now I can say if the specific filter is all, then I'm going to do certain things. Actually, I would prefer all to just be the default. It just sounds nicer. So let's say if I'm going to do something specific, if the specific filter is active, same, do something specific if it's completed, or I'll do something specific if the filter is all, basically. If, else if. So if it's active, what I want to do is make the completed to-dos display none, right? So I basically get all the completed to-dos with document.querySelector all dot completed, and then for each of those completed, for each completed to do, I'm going to do completed to-do.style.display equals none. So now if I click active, the completed one is now display none. And let's just try this with multiple ones and see if they all go away. And yes, I just see the ones I'm supposed to see. For completed, if I click completed instead, I don't want to see the active ones, right? I just want to see the completed ones. So I can grab all of the to-dos, and for each to-do, I can say if the to-do dot class list contains completed, then I will, if it does not contain completed, then I want to make the to-do display none. So if I click on completed now, then it's going to run this function. We're going to get the specific filter, which is going to be completed, lowercase. So we're going to match this case here. And what that's going to do is get all the to-dos, and then for each of them, if the to-do does not contain the class completed, then we're going to give it display none. So now we only see what we're supposed to see. However, let's check if this works if I flip from active to completed. It doesn't. Or from completed to active. It doesn't. Why? Can you guess? It's because if I click active, then the to-do that was marked completed now is display none, so we can't see it. Now when I click completed, it's going to make all of these to-dos display none because none of these are completed. So I not only when I click one of these guys do I have to make display none for the certain ones, but I also need to show the ones that I'm supposed to see. Even if the ones I'm supposed to see are already visible, there's nothing wrong with saying show them. It's just going to remain shown. So there's nothing wrong with that. So instead of grabbing all the completed ones and grabbing all the non-completed ones and doing stuff to both of them, I'm just going to grab all the to-dos, and then based on what filter was clicked and based on if the to-do has the completed class or not, then I'll determine what display to set, basically. So I'm going to change things a tiny bit, and let's grab all of our to-dos. So let to-dos, and I don't want to use the word to-dos. Let me make sure in my code I'm only using that where it should be. Oh, interesting. No, never mind. Sorry. Okay, so to-dos is a variable already here, and I don't want to mess with it. So I don't want to set it again. So I'm going to say current to-dos, and that is document query selector all to-do. And I'm going to do current to-dos dot for each to-do function for each to-do. What am I going to do? I'm going to say if I'm going to set the to-dos style.display to something, right? It's either going to be completed, or sorry, it's either going to be display none or it's going to be display something else, right? That something else, just by the way, is going to be flex because the classes on all the to-dos are bar and to-do and completed. But if you look at completed, all it does is change colors and text decoration. It doesn't have anything to do with the property display. But if you go to dot bar, that's where I say display flex. So basically for to-do, we're going to toggle, because the to-do is also a bar, we're going to toggle the to-do either to display none or display flex. So either the display value is going to be none or flex, depending on certain scenarios, right? So the scenarios are what the specific filter that was clicked is, and what if the to-do has completed or not, has the completed to-do is completed. So if the to-do has been completed, and if it has been completed, then it will dot class, its class list will contain the class completed. So that's determining if the to-do is completed. So if the to-do is completed and the specific filter is completed, so basically if the to-do is completed and the specific filter that we clicked is completed, then we want to set the to-do's style.display display equal to flex, meaning it should be seen. Else, if the there's going to be a tricky little if stuff here. So let me reorder a little bit. Let's just write them out, all the cases, and then I'll refactor it. So if the to-do, let me start out with this. If the specific filter is completed and the to-do is completed, then show it, basically. Else, if the specific filter is completed and the to-do is not completed, then the to-do style should be none. Else, if the specific filter is active and the to-do is completed, another case will be that the specific filter is active and the to-do is not completed. And the last case is if the specific filter is all. And in that case, no matter what, we want to show the to-do. But let's talk about these two. If the specific filter is active and the to-do is completed, then we don't want to show it. If the specific filter is active and the to-do is not completed, then we do want to show it because active means it's not completed. So now when I click active, let's see if this works. Now I see the ones that weren't completed. When I go to completed, the guy is still there. When I click all, we see everything. So that worked. Not the prettiest logic, maybe. There might be a way to refactor it, but at least it's working. So that's the most important thing. And it's not that hard to read what's going on. It's pretty straightforward. And I'm not going to spend time refactoring it at the moment. Okay, so now the last thing we have to do when we click a filter is update the UI, right? We want completed to be blue if we're looking at completed, or active to be blue when we're looking at active, or all to be blue when we're looking at all. So we have to change the UI as well. And how do we do that? Well, we have this selected class on filter. So basically, when a filter is clicked, we want to set that filter to class selected and remove the class selected from the filters that were not clicked. So the way to do that is I'm getting the specific filter that got clicked in this event listener, right? So let's just go below this stuff and do the filter stuff down here. So basically I know the specific filter, so I can loop through each of the filters, and whichever one was clicked, I can set the selected class, and for the other ones, I can remove the selected class. So I can say for filters dot for each filter. Now I need to be careful because I'm already looping through filters up here, but in the event listener function, I'm also going to loop through the filters. So I just want to ensure that this variable is not going to mess with this filter variable. So I'm going to say, I'll say item for now. So filters that for each item, and each item is a filter. I'll say filter item. How about that? For each filter item, I'm going to stop if the filter item class filter item dot inner text dot to lowercase is equal to my specific filter, then I know that that one should be selected. So the filter item dot class list dot add selected. I'm adding the class selected. Otherwise, I need the class that otherwise, if the filter item's inner text didn't match the specific filter that was clicked, then I want to remove the class selected. And I'm missing a parenthesis there. And so let's see now. All right, so now it is working. And one final thing that I would like to do is notice that, this event is firing. This event listener click is firing every time I click one of these filters, right? However, if I'm already on all, I don't really want to run all this again, right? Like the end result's going to be the same. So like I said before, we don't want our computer to be doing unnecessary code for no reason, right? So before doing all this stuff, once I've determined what the specific filter that was clicked is, I think I want to check first if the filter that got clicked is the currently selected filter as well, right? If so, I don't need to run any of the logic that's going on down here, because the whole purpose of it is to filter the list, but the list will already be filtered how I want it to be filtered. So I can say if the specific, so let me get the currently selected filter, and all I have to do is do document query selector selected, and that's going to give me the filter that currently has the class selected. So I can say if the specific filter dot is equal to the currently selected filter dot inner text dot to lowercase. So I'm trying to match the specific filter that was clicked, the event target's inner text lowercase, to the one that's currently selected. If the one that's currently selected matches the one that just got clicked, then we don't have to do anything. So the opposite is if they don't match, then we want to do all that stuff. So I can say if they are not equal, then I'll do all this stuff. Okay, so now let's see if we're still working here. And also let's put a console log inside, inside this if statement. So we're going to check when all the logic for filtering everything runs. So obviously it will run if I click active because we're currently on all. Or it's going to run completed. It's going to run all. It's going to run active, completed, all, completed, all, active. But if I click active now, notice that the count of the logs doesn't increase. Or if I refresh and try to click all, I don't get this console log because of this if condition. So now I've saved my computer from having to run all this logic because it would have just resulted in the same UI anyway. Great. So we are actually done with all of the functionality that this design provided. I do want to just refactor this because this is an opportunity to talk about extracting functions and calling functions within functions. So this is a good practice for that. And then I'll just lastly talk about future, or I'll allude to the next video I'm going to make on this. So let's extract some stuff out here. This clearly is not the easiest function to read, right? If I'm just going in and debugging, and I'm not even someone who worked on this project, it'll take me a minute to figure out what's going on in all this, right? So why don't we make this a lot easier for yourself to come at later, or a collaborator to read. So we're going to look for opportunities to extract functions out to make this specific function that's happening when we click a filter, this event listener function. We want it to be very readable and know exactly what's happening in this function. So first of all, we're getting the currently selected filter, and we're getting the, I want to call, instead of specific filter, I want to say clicked filter. That would make more sense. Uh, specific filters, call it clicked filter instead. That makes more sense. So if the click filter is not the same as the currently selected filter. In fact, I would even put this inner text to lowercase right up here so that I can more clearly match them and say if the click filter is not the same as the currently selected filter, then we do all the logic for filtering the list of to-dos. So that already made the top clearer. I could even go one step further and create a function that determines if the click filter is the selected filter. So I'm gonna, let's say, I'll call the function filter is already selected, and I pass in the clicked filter. So I could even say the clicked filter is already selected. And so I'm gonna do this stuff here. I'm gonna say that I'm gonna grab the currently selected filter. I already have the clicked filter that's being passed into the function. And the whole point of this function is to return true or false. And I'm going to return if the clicked filter is equal to the currently selected filter. If this is true, it's going to return true. If it's false, it's going to return false. Now I can take out these two lines. Actually, I need that line. And instead of this if condition, I can call this function and pass in the clicked filter. So I grab the click filter from the event target. I have to do that to determine which um, filter was actually clicked. I could even take this into a function and to make it even more readable and say function extract clicked filter, or let's say determine clicked filter, and I pass in the event, and using the event I return what the clicked filter was. So now this is even clearer, that I grab the click filter from the function determine clicked filter. All I do is I pass in the event, and that returns the clicked filter. And then I use the click filter, oops, in this function that determines if the click filter is already selected. If the click filter is already selected, then I don't want to run anything. So rather, when the click filter, actually, let me just call it click filter is not. Yeah, if the click filter is not already selected, then I want to do all of the logic below. Not only is this okay now, and let's just make sure, still working. Actually, let me do the console log because I don't really know if it's working. Yeah, it's working because when I click inactive, the currently active selected filter, it's not console logging more. So this is still working. I can even, instead of doing this, I can even pop that here. So I can even say, if not, the click filter is already selected, and I pass in determine the click filter from the event, but let's just keep it like it was before. But I could do it all in one line, which is cool. So I'm reading this now as an engineer. I see, okay, I'm getting the click filter, and I'm determining the click filter from the event, basically, that happened when the click happened. And then I'm checking if the click filter is already selected. And I'm saying, if not, then I'm going to do a bunch of stuff. Now, this bunch of stuff I can also break out into functions so that this click handler function becomes much simpler to read. The purpose of this block here is to change the list of to-dos that is visible, right? So what if we had a function, let's see if this will work, change to-do list based on filter. And so the purpose, let's grab all this and see what we need to do. So we have the current to-dos, we get all the to-dos, we get, and then we loop through each to-do, and based on, okay, so we need the click filter in here. And we also need to-do is completed. So we just need the click filter, and I think that that's all we need. So now all this logic we can remove and just call the function and pass in click filter. Let's see if it will still work. Still works. So as you can see, we're really reducing the work that's required if you look at what happens when you click a filter, right? So lastly, we have a filter here. So I'm going to create a function called change filter. And change filter will we need the click filter again. So I'm going to run the function change filter, pass in click filter, and what it's going to do is go through each filter and based on the click filter, determine which filter item. As we're looping through the filters, it's matching to the clicked filter. And if the item is the same as the click filter, then we're adding the class selected. If not, we're removing the class selected. And there we go. So now it's still working. Everything looks good. And check out this line of code here. So much smaller. We have taken all the filters, set event listeners on each one, and look at the event listener click handler function now. It's so easy to read. You grab which filter was clicked, you check if it's already selected. If it's not already selected, you change the to-do list based on the filter, and then you change the filter itself. I'll even say change filter UI because that's all it's really doing. Okay, so look how easy this is to read. Now, if there's a bug with, let's say, I click this and it doesn't change color, I know that there's a problem with changing the filter's UI. What if the to-do list was working properly, but the colors weren't working? Then I would very quickly be able to come here and be able to say, see, okay, changing the filter UI is not what's working. So I can just go now to this tiny block of code and figure out what the problem is. If I had all this code in the click handler function here without breaking it into smaller functions, then I would have to go through a lot more code to dissect where the problem is. So this makes it a lot easier to debug basically, and to keep your code clean as you move forward. Typically, a good way to get to this point is to write everything in a bigger function, and then when the function gets big and you realize that a lot of stuff is happening in there, you can figure out how to break it up into smaller functions. It takes a little bit more experience to break out functions before you've even coded anything. You'll start to see how things can break out even before you make them with more experience. But it's understandable if you're not at that point yet. So it's better now if you're at a point where you can't do that to just write the code, but then analyze it, see where it looks confused, where things look a little bit long, and see how you can break them out. So there are a few things I forgot to do in order to make sure that we have officially finished this filter feature. We didn't consider what happens if you go to active and then you click. If you click and toggle an item to completed, when you're on the active filter, the item should disappear. It should only show up when you go to completed or all, but it shouldn't be visible in active once you make an item completed. Similarly, in completed, if you toggle an item back to active, it shouldn't be here, right? So that's a problem. And also when we're in completed, whenever we create a new to-do, that is inherently going to be an active to-do, so it should not show up in completed, right? So we have to finalize our filter code and make sure that this stuff doesn't happen. So let's look at our code right now and figure out what happens when we're in the active tab and we click on a to-do. Well, right now, we have event listeners when we click on the to-do, right? And that's kind of where the logic will begin. for figuring this out. So where's our logic? When we click it to do, it's in here. So at the moment, whenever we click it to do, we just change its class and then we update how many items are left. So clearly we're not doing anything here to remove the item from the DOM or not remove the item from the DOM rather, but to change the display from none to flex, right? We do that. When do we do that? When we change the filter, we do that. When we change the filter, we change the, if it's on active, then the completed tasks will be inactive when we're, or completed when we're on, or will be invisible rather. And when we're on completed, then the active ones will be invisible and the other one, and the completed ones will be visible, right? However, we're not doing anything when an item gets clicked, right? We're only doing something regarding display none or flex when we change the actual filter. So we actually have to mess more with the to-do click handler and figure out what to do here. So let's think through it. When the to-do click handler fires, we surely want to change the to-dos class, so that's fine. We do want to update the items that are left as well. However, we also want to update the list that we see, right? Let's say we're inactive, right? And then we click this. Well, we want the list to update, don't we? So what has to change is we have to go through the list again and do the display none or flex for all the items again, essentially. So let's just make a function called update list that's going to do that for us, and then we'll see opportunities to make our code more dry and combine the code lines here with the code lines here when we change the to-do list based on the filter. So I'm going to create a function called update list, and we're going to figure out what to do in here. So update list should grab all the items and then go through them and make the ones disappear that are supposed to disappear. So actually, I think that the logic is going to be very similar. We just have to get all the current to-dos. Then for each of them, we go through the list, and if the to-do is completed, if it contains the class completed. And I think all this logic is actually going to be exactly the same. So we're going to want to change the to-do list based on the filter. And instead of passing in a filter that was clicked, we're not clicking on a filter right now. So that's the only thing that we have to modify, is that I'm actually going to change this to just filter. So we're passing a certain filter into this function. And if that filter we pass in is such and such, then we do such and such. So when we run this function, when we click a filter, we pass in the click filter, and that is the filter that is our input. But we don't have to explicitly call this clicked filter, because we're going to actually pass in the filter that is currently active, basically. Sorry to use the word active again, but it's the best word. The filter that's currently on, that's the one that we have to pass in to this function when we click on a to-do. Because when we click on a to-do, we don't have access to a filter that was clicked. We didn't click a filter. But we are able to get the filter that is currently active, and that's what we care about. So instead of doing update list, I'm actually just going to run the change the to-do list based on filter, but we have to pass in filter. But what is filter, right? First of all, let's call it current filter. We're going to pass in the current filter, and we just have to figure out what current filter is. What is it? And how do we get that? Hopefully you can think of this and pause it if you have to, but I'm going to help it now, and it is basically the filter of the three that has the class selected. There's only ever going to be one filter with class selected, so all I have to do is document.querySelector.selected, and that is our current filter. Now, to change to-do list based on filter, not filter, expects filter to be a string. So we actually have to do slightly more. We can't just pass in current filter in the form of a DOM node, right? This returns a DOM node to us, but we just want the string, right? So we have to get its inner text. And also, remember, we lowercase this text. In that case, now this I think should be working. Let's check. When I'm inactive and I click, now it's gone, but it's, which one did I click? I don't even remember. Start again. I'm inactive. I click jog around the park. I go to completed. There's jog around the park. Click it again. Go back to active. Jog around the park is now active. And there we go. It's actually working. And so therefore, the last thing we have to do is when we're in completed, we have to do something when we add a new to-do. So again, I think we could just run this filter, run this function when we create a new to-do, because we just need to check essentially if the current filter is actually one more thing that we can do to just optimize this a little bit more before I move on to this issue is that we actually don't have to change the to-do list based on the filter if the filter is all, correct? If we click a to-do and the filter is all, then we don't need to change the to-do list that we currently see, right? If we're on all, if we click a to-do, we don't need to update the list any more than it's being updated in these two lines, right? In these two lines, we're just toggling completed or not completed, and we're updating the items left, and that's perfectly fine, right? It's only when we are in one of these guys that we have to do, like, recalculate this list again, basically. So I can actually just check first if the current filter is not all. Then I do change to-do list based on the filter. And that just saves our computer a little bit of work in case we're clicking these guys and we're in the all filter right now. So in that same vein, I think we're going to want to do something similar when we create a new to-do. So where is that? That is here. So once we add a new item to the DOM, and then we update the items left calculation here, we also want to make sure that what we see is accurate based on the current filter. So we have to get what the current filter is, and then check if it's not all. If it's not all, that means it's either active or completed. Actually, I think we just need to do it if it's completed. If it's active, a new to-do is going to be active by default. So if we're in active and we add a new to-do, we don't have to do any extra checking if this new to-do should be here, visible or not. We know in active, if we create a new to-do, it should be visible. If we are in completed and we create a new to-do, it should not be visible. So now we just saw it work, that if the current filter is completed, this is in the click handler again, if we're creating a new to-do. So when we create a new to-do, we say if the current filter is completed, then we change the to-do list based on the current filter. So the item basically got added into this list, but right here, and the items left got updated. See, now it's 7 from 6, but we immediately check what filter we're on, and we realize, oh, we're on completed. So let's update the to-do list because that item we just created, we know is not going to belong in this UI until we go to active or all. And in active and all, creating a new to-do is perfectly fine because the new to-do is active. So with that, I have finished my demonstration of how to use JavaScript to make your first UIs, being given a design. And of course, given the fact that you're decent with HTML and CSS, I believe that you may not be at the point where your HTML and CSS is perfect, but by doing these projects, you're going to have to keep using HTML, CSS before you even do the JavaScript or in conjunction with doing the JavaScript. So through doing more projects like this, you will get better with all three at the same time. And Frontend Mentor is a great place to just find projects to just start working on immediately. Now, I just want to talk about also how you can take a project from Frontend Mentor and make something even more interesting out of it. Um, you're given this design, right? But this design doesn't include many things that you can add, right? There's a lot of things you can add. You can drag and drop um, to sort the items. Actually, a lot of these won't be possible. These feature extension ideas I have won't be as super possible before I do my video on solving this same UI in JavaScript with a different approach. So I'm going to do that in the next video. But just giving you an idea of how you take a design from Front End Mentor and make it more complicated, or how you can take any idea, um, any simple project you've worked on, and expand on it and make it actually interesting to employers potentially. So this, you can add sorting for drag and drop sorting. You can add, you know, which ones got created and sort based on the order of the most recently created or whatever. You can allow the user to create different tags for their to-dos. So like, one can be chores, one can be work, and just to tag all the to-do items and then filter based on the tag, or filter based on the date, the tag, if it's active, it's completed, and have all those filters be possible. Of course, there's no design for this given to you from Front End Mentor, but so at that point, it's kind of up to you to expand the features and come up with the designs for them. But it is what it is. Not going to talk about that one yet. And of course, you can actually add a database in with this so that you're actually storing and add like authentication and user accounts. So you actually have real users, real data for each user in regards to like all of their to-dos and all the categories that they've created, and if those to-dos are active and completed and when they were created and everything. So actually implementing a real database and making this a real full stack application, deploying it, and even launching it. So those are all ways that you make this a legitimate project going from this point. And so if I'm a beginner, first of all, of course, I'd watch the way to solve it with the other approach, which is actually the correct approach, because it assumes that the app has a database. But after watching that, I recommend you build more projects and also experiment with feature extensions. So you can take this project we built here and then work on these feature extension ideas as well. So hopefully you like this video. I know it was a long one, but hopefully it was very informative. And please share it with anyone who you think would find it useful. Follow me for more videos just like this, and please comment what you want to see, what you want to see me build. Give me a project to work on, and I'll build it in a video, or a technology you want to see me build a project with, anything. I love the idea of getting suggestions, because then I know exactly what video I can make rather than just having to come up with some random video. So hopefully you liked it. I also have a free Facebook group if you want to be in more close contact with me. So I link that in the description. And I will see you in the next video, where we will solve this very same, whoops, solve this very same issue again, but with JavaScript in the format that is technically correct. All right, so thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.